Happy 7-month anniversary to Pop. We started back on May 1st of this year, and it's now December 1st. So it's awesome. We've actually made it a year and over now, so that's great. So this is the month of December, and obviously I'll be home in 2 days. But I will say right now that December and January are going to be another, something you absolutely love so much, themed months of Versus, which makes it even harder to try to come up with one. But this theme works really well given the fact of what time of year it is. It's obviously getting into Oscar season. So these are going to be Oscar-themed Versus. These battles will be between movies that have had one or more nominations and or maybe even wins. It just depends on how the battle is. And we're starting off with our first cryptic comment is Underdog. Makes perfect sense for these movies. So this is the battle of Rocky against the Fighter.
Obviously, this was going to be Rocky and Raging Bull.
Correct.
But when you think about it, obviously the Fighter is a lot more like Rocky than Raging Bull is.
Correct.
So, Rocky was going to be there regardless. I guess I will start with Rocky. Clearly, Rocky won a particular Oscar that stands out over the others.
Yeah, without question.
Obviously, Rocky won the most prestigious Oscar you could possibly win, which is Best Picture, beating out Network and Taxi Driver and All the President's Men and Bound for Glory, that Woody Guthrie biopic starring David Carradine. And it got like 10 nominations. It also won director for John G. Avildsen, who did he also did The Karate Kid, and it won editing. Yes.
Which is a crucial thing to win nowadays.
And it was nominated for actor for Stallone and actress for Talia Shire, and it got 2 supporting actor nominations for Burgess Meredith and Burt Young. And Stallone got another nomination for screenplay, but he got beat by Patty Chayefsky for Network, which, how this beat Network is still something that baffles people sometimes. So yeah, it won 3 and was nominated for 10.
That's crazy. I did not know it had 10 nominations.
Yeah, the others were, I'm going to cheat for a second. The others were song, of course.
Of course.
And sound.
How did it not win song?
I don't remember what won that year.
That's an iconic song. Still to this day. Movie montages throughout the ages have used the song.
Alright, I'll go ahead and start with Rocky now. The actual movie. We went through statistics. I guess that's going to be the thing. We go through statistics first.
That works.
Basically, it's even though they're both kind of the same setup, the guy from the small, well, not Philadelphia, it's not a small town, but I mean, like, he's from a lower part, and nobody knows about him, and he's not really that famous.
Mm-hmm.
Manages to get this. Well, I guess I guess the main things the movie have in common are they're the underdog that gets the big shot, and they have there's a romance on the side of the person that becomes their wife eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And they have people in their life that get in their way, like Mickey Ward's family, and like. You have Burt Young, who wants to cash in on everything. You have Burgess Meredith, who's trying to... It gets to that moment in Rocky, obviously, where nobody gives a shit about him. Like, he and Mickey have this constant feud about how his locker was given to somebody else, and he's basically thrown out of the gym, and everybody calls him a bum, and nobody cares about it, because you're always, if you're an underdog boxer, you get called a bum at least 50 times in your life.
Correct.
But then suddenly, Apollo Creed just chooses him at random to give him a shot at the title, and suddenly everybody in Rocky's life wants to be helpful. But the thing about the Rocky character that makes him different is he's one of those... He's tough enough to, like, break you. No pun intended for the 4th movie later, but he's basically this... He just wants to be a good guy, basically.
Okay.
Like, he's somebody you can easily, like, he works for, like, a crime boss. named Gazzo, who was the killer in the original Maniac movie. His friend in real life, Joe Spinell, but who was his friend. He's no longer with us. There's this particular moment at the beginning where he's supposed to, this guy owes money to this crime boss, so it's Rocky's job to break this guy's thumb. But he kind of sets that brute with a heart of gold tone when he doesn't break the guy's thumb, because he doesn't want to. So, even that's what he's been paid to do. And, you know, we see him doing good guy stuff like these. The guy that's drunk and passed out outside the bar, he picks up off the sidewalk and carries him back inside and sets him in a booth. And there's that girl that's hanging out with, like, those people that, like, you know, like, cuss and drink and smoke and are just, you know, a bad crowd. And he's trying to get her away from them because she's going to grow up to be one of them. And there's this really funny scene where he's walking her home, and he's talking about everything that's going to become of her if she hangs up with them, and he's like telling her everything that's going to happen, and he's like, you know, you're going to smell bad, and you're going to have bad health, and you're going to become, now I got to say a bad word here, a whore.
I remember that.
It's like, I just love the warning. I'm about to say a bad word, and you're like, oh shit, what's it going to be? This is a big warning. And he just, whore.
In the 70s, though, to his credit, that was a big word.
Yeah, and he was talking to a younger girl. So.
Exactly.
It's just like, I think Carlton Banks once said, excuse my harsh language, but gosh darn it.
I remember that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, and of course, his thing is to go into the pet shop every day and be nice to Adrian, who is... His friend Polly's, I don't know what Polly is to him, I guess it's a friend, sister, who's like verbally, emotionally abusive to her, and she's like really meek and shy and doesn't really say anything. And most people think she's probably slow, but she's just like, you know, really shy, basically. And that's a lot of the movie. Here's the thing about Rocky. Rocky's basically the quintessential boxing movie.
Yeah, definitely.
And everybody would agree with that, probably. But the difference, this is a slight difference in movies, too, even though the fighter's kind of a lot like this also. What a lot of people don't realize about the original Rocky is the entire movie is a build-up to one fight.
Yeah.
There is one fight in the whole movie, if you don't count the spar in the very first scene.
Yeah, there is only one boxing match in the entire film.
It's a 2-hour movie. An hour and 45 minutes is a build-up to the last 15-minute fight. So, a huge portion of the movie is this ongoing love story with Adrian, where he slowly, progressively gets a little more successful with her each time. Like he always has a bad joke prepared to tell her every day. Like he says, I invent a joke, and then I go in there and I tell her the joke, and then I do it again the next day. The one we actually get to hear him tell us something like, he got mad at his turtle, so he like hit it on the back on the shell because it was choking on its food, so he hit it on the back to help it, and when he hit it, it was shell shocked. Something like that. Regardless, it makes him... There's just those little things about him that make him a really likable character. There's one thing that stands out to me. There's one thing I see in this movie where I'm like, man, I really like this guy. You know, you decorate for Christmas, naturally.
Yeah.
And there's a portion of this movie that goes through Christmas. Rocky has a particular... I don't even know if many people even notice it. It's just something that's there in one shot, and then it just kind of pans away. Rocky's Christmas decoration. It's the only Christmas decoration I recall him actually seeing. He has this big poster of Rocky Marciano on his wall, which is like a big thing, like Mickey talks about it and all that. And his one Christmas decoration I remember seeing is, it's a fake beard that he has like tacked onto the Rocky Marciano poster. Like a Santa beard.
That's awesome.
So yeah, he's a very easy character to root for, even though he's not very... He even makes mention that he's not a very bright character. he's, well, obviously we don't know how long he's been fighting, so obviously he's like even in the second movie, he says something like, I can't tell time too well. so, so basically all he has is his little turtles who are Cuff and Link, and his fish that's named Moby Dick. And he actually has them, like, talk to each other, or tries to get them to communicate.
Yeah.
But then, of course, one day, Apollo Creed decides, basically, to draw a crowd. He's just gonna pick somebody totally at random that's, like, from the slums to fight him. But the problem is we don't really learn this till later, but he's basically, Apollo is basically all about the politics of it. Like, he's not really thinking so much about the fight itself as it is, like, who's going to be there and, like, how well it's set up and, like,
Obviously.
the attendance and all that. There's even a point in time where the famous scene where he's punching the meat in the giant freezer. And he's just, like, this is a massive piece of meat, and he's punching it so hard he's, like, breaking the ribs on it. And he's being interviewed on the news, and this is being televised as he's punching this gigantic piece of meat to shit, practically. And we see one of the people that works for Apollo watching the TV, and this is when we see that, this is a potential threat. And the guy actually says, Apollo, you might want to come and see the guy you're fighting on TV and look, what he's doing. And Apollo doesn't even, like, hear him. Like, he's not even paying attention. So he actually goes into the fight just thinking the Rocky's just going to be this
Bum.
The people are going to attend. They're there to see him knock Rocky out, and then he'll move on to the next fight. That's what he's expecting. So, of course, we get our big... the montage actually isn't until, like, an hour and a half in.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of builds up to it a little bit. Like, we see him, get out of bed and do the raw eggs thing. And they say, like, it's 28 degrees outside, and he starts to go running. But he's very, like, very slow about it. And then finally we go through the same routine again, only Gonna Fly Now is playing, and everything's all triumphant, and he runs up the steps and all that. There's a few characters to talk about. We'll talk about Adrian, who is an interesting character, because there's kind of that natural thing where people are really shy, but then once you are spending time around them, they get less shy. Talia Shire's performance actually goes through that change, because she's like this mute practically when we first meet her, and then by the end of the movie she's like this, basically Rocky's other half. Mm-hmm. And she, does the thing where she stands up to Paulie and all that, and we'll get to that in a second, though. There's Mickey, which is funny, since that's, we're about to go on to Mickey Ward's story, but Burgess Meredith's Mickey is this, basically everything you expect when you think of a trainer character.
Yes.
You're gonna
eat lightning and crab thunder.
Yeah. Being there when he's doing the one-arm push-ups and all that, but there's the one scene where obviously Mickey's the one that's been like just degrading him whenever he steps into the gym. So there's finally that scene where Mickey goes to Rocky's apartment, and they do it's Stallone's big Oscar scene. I guess you could say it's Burgess Meredith's Oscar scene also. He's talking about all the potential he has now. He's going to train him and all that, and then Rocky just has this massive blow up where he talks about how nobody, helped him before, and nobody cared about him before, and now suddenly, because he's got a title shot, everybody wants to be his friend, and everybody wants to help him, and he talks about how he doesn't need anybody, because he got the title shot without anybody's help, he can do everything else without anybody's help, and all that, and it's this really, I don't know how to describe it, it's a scene that's not easy to forget, where Mickey just kind of accepts defeat and walks away. And as Mickey is walking out of the apartment, you can still hear Rocky just, like, clear as day because he's yelling so loud. And then finally Mickey's, like, down the street, and we can still hear Rocky screaming, but then Rocky comes running out, and we see them shake hands at a distance. That lets you know the training is starting. Mickey tries to get him to drop Adrian to train, but that never comes back.
I realized it was a futile attempt.
That's like one scene, and Rocky actually, acts like he might actually do that, but then that doesn't go anywhere. I just thought about it.
That's interesting.
A weaker part of the movie, even though it resulted in one of the movie's 10 Oscar nominations, was it's not Burt Young's performance; it's the character of Paulie. He's basically this character that's constantly pissed off and constantly berating people. And, he's the one that's, like, got the baseball bat and he's, like, breaking shit in the house because he's pissed. And, he's basically doing everything he can to make money off of Rocky. Like, he keeps trying to get Rocky to help him get a job with that crime boss, but he won't because he's too inept.
Yeah.
Rocky's just too nice to tell him that. But there's this particular scene where it's Christmas and he comes home. He's got like a fucking wreath around his arm, and it's the scene with the baseball bat where they're watching Rocky on TV and all that, and Apollo Creed, and it's this really soap opera-y, melodramatic scene that I mean, it's the big moment where Adrian finally stands up to him after he's like destructed everything in the house, and she talks about how abusive he is, and it's a big emotional peak for the movie itself, but it's one of the only times in the movie where I just like, But it was 1976, so, it probably wasn't as played out back then. So, I guess, that's not something you can really criticize it too much for.
No.
Yeah, that's another thing that shows how likable Rocky is after all of this, like all the berating and all the melodrama and all the insults, there's this joke where Rocky actually helps out Paulie and helps him make money by advertising the meat place that he works for on his robe.
Mm-hmm.
Like they say, Paulie's going to get like $3,000 out of this, and they say, well, what do you get out of it? And he's like, this robe. Like the name of the meatpacking place is bigger than Rocky's name on the back of the robe.
I remember seeing that.
So, and then we go into the fight. Carl Weathers is great in this too, by the way. He's got that. Obviously, his character evolved over the series, but it's kind of when he was Harvey Dent. It's like he was kind of preparing for that too. Or I guess you could say his Harvey Dent had Apollo in him. I want to say something about the fight in particular. I'm talking about the commentators. Is there a possibility that the commentators at the end of Rocky are a parody? Because these fucking guys...
I never thought of it that way before.
They're like the worst commentators I've ever heard, and they're literally saying like every single detail of everything that's happening before the fight even happens. Like it's like there's Apollo Creed and he appears to be George Washington. Yep, he's definitely George Washington. He's got the wig, he's got the hat. That is definitely George Washington. Oh, well, he's taking the hat off now.
Oh God.
Oh, now he's got that American flag get up. I say, he is removing his hat once again. Are they doing a parody of commentators by any chance?
I mean, I don't remember much boxing commentary in the 70s, obviously, but when it comes down to it, I mean, it's possible it's a parody.
Yeah.
But those boxing commentary, unlike wrestling commentary, is usually really, really obvious. Like, I'm talking like Jason Bateman and Dodgeball obvious. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yes, he's not going to be able to see very well out there, Cody. All right. So anyway, we reach the big ending. The ending that every fucking buddy in the world knows.
Yes.
The ending that screams, yes, the same director made The Karate Kid 8 years later.
Yeah.
what he says right before the scene with the fight, he's laying in bed with Adrian, and he says, basically he's laying in bed with Adrian, and he spoils the movie. He says, I don't stand a chance. I know I'm gonna lose. This is just a publicity thing. This just is not gonna happen. I just want to still be standing when the bell rings. That's it. So, the movie ends, and of course, Rocky has gotten the shit beat out of him. To that really, it looks fake as fuck, but still, when they, both of his eyes are swollen shut and he can't see, so they have to cut him. But he still gives Apollo the fight, and he does finish the match standing, which was the whole point. But apparently, I hadn't heard this. Apparently, the ending is often misinterpreted, and a lot of people think, with the way he celebrated, a lot of people think Rocky won, apparently.
He lost.
Yeah, but apparently it's very misinterpreted, is what I've been hearing. I'd never really...
Okay, if you scored...
I was under the impression most people realized what happened.
If you scored the fight, if you watch the actual fight, if you scored the fight like a boxing fight would be scored, yeah, Rocky got beat pretty severely. And definitely lost via decision, without question.
And then there's the... I think it's just because Rocky doesn't care. He
survived.
There's the big obviously the moment everybody knows. He's running through he's being trampled by the crowd screaming for Adrian, and they're trying to find their way through the crowd to find each other. And this is happening while the announcer is saying the results. Like, Rocky's not even listening to what the results were.
I lost, I'm gonna run.
And then we see, Apollo, celebrate briefly. And then literally as soon as Rocky and Adrian find each other, this shot happens and the movie just ends. It all happens really fast. So,
it's like the sports cavalcade music in the background.
Yeah. That they used in Man on the Moon.
Yep.
So, that's pretty much that. And yeah, it is like, it seems cheesy when you think about it, like today.
Yeah.
But where you need to put your mind is, you're thinking of the other cheesy movies. Like, this was that movie, and every other cheesy movie was stealing from this.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like imagine being in 76 and seeing this for the first... Like, all those cheesy movies that you've seen, imagine seeing that for the first time. That's what this movie was like then.
It's a whole new appreciation for it.
So, yeah. I know it's been done so many times now, and, there's like 5 sequels. It's hard to take your mind back to thinking about the way it was when it was made and seeing how it managed to be as beloved as it is.
And to going back to the original versus, which was Rocky against Raging Bull. No, we were not trying to play up the grudge match coming out. That was never my intention.
Especially since grudge match is a full-on comedy.
You can tell by the trailer.
Yeah, fucking Kevin Hart.
Yes.
Our next movie has a bit of an obstacle.
Yes.
As I said, you've seen so many of these Underdog movies. Everything seems like a cheesy cliche.
Mm-hmm.
So The Fighter, having been made only 3 years ago... only 3 years ago? That's actually a long time.
Yeah.
Has to overcome the fact that it is basically a Rocky of this day and age.
Yeah, exactly.
That has to go through these. Well, the difference, though, is everything in The Fighter. Obviously, The Fighter, is real.
Yeah.
Like, everybody in it is real and all that. And everything really happened. And the brothers were actually consultants on the movie itself.
True.
Rocky was totally fictional. Rocky was just, like, in Stallone's head, and he wrote it. So, I guess we'll talk about... the statistics.
Yes.
I don't remember all the technicians it got. I'm pretty sure it got in editing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nominated for picture.
Yep.
It was nominated for director.
Mm-hmm.
It was nominated for screenplay, original screenplay. Amy Adams got a supporting actress nomination. And, of course, most notably, Christian Bale won
Yep.
Best Supporting Actor, and Melissa Leo won Best Supporting Actress.
Yes.
So, having said that, and apparently this movie made like a massive comeback too. Like, it was one of those movies where it came out late, so it was a question mark, and people didn't really know how it was gonna do. But there was just a lot of buzz around Bale.
Yeah.
And I think that surge that got it like into picture and director was like kind of last minute.
This was actually my Oscar choice for that year, without question.
Because I remember, I think a lot of people accuse, like when this was the year of the shocking Nolan snub for Inception.
Yep.
I think a lot of people, I think it was the Coen brothers, but most people think it was David O. Russell that got the last spot. So, I don't know. It's hard to think back then.
Yeah.
Okay, so once again, there's really not the thing that Rocky actually starts with boxing immediately, but it's just this spar in the gym. The fighter actually takes a little while because we don't start with we actually start with Bale in front of the camera doing the documentary.
Yep.
And that was what shot where Bale had a lot of buzz around this time, but it hadn't come out yet when he was getting his buzz, but he was winning the Critics Awards because they had been screened for them.
Yep.
And it's one of those movies where you're like, man, like they're talking about Bale winning this thing. I wonder, what all he does. And we start over a black screen, and it's talking about it being low, and we hear Bale talking, and he's like saying, do you want me to look in this camera? Am I supposed to look away from the camera? And then he comes on the screen, and the very first look at him, you're like, holy shit, he went all out. Just the very first second you see him, you see all the places he went to be in this part. The weight is gone, the constant movement is there, the thing about that performance that's interesting is a lot of people complained that he was too over the top. Apparently most people, and you get a glimpse of this at the very end, they play real footage. A lot of people who know the real Dickie said that Bale was almost subtle because the real Dickie is apparently like totally amplified as far as Bale's portrayal is concerned. So, yes, as over the top as he was, apparently, if you know the real guy, they say Bale was a little more restrained, actually. So, that should be. The real guy was even at both of them were at the Oscars, too, that year. Because Bale actually pointed him out when he was on stage.
Didn't he go up on stage at one of the ceremonies as well?
I think it was the Globes.
Because they trying to get him, he wouldn't stop talking, and Bale had to calm him down.
I think that was the Globes. Because that was when he's because that's when Bale just randomly goes, Robert De Niro, you're the fucking man, and they turned off the microphone. Anyway, so the movie starts and we see Mickey at work, and he's like does road work. I think Dickie works with him.
Mm-hmm.
And we just see there's this great opening title sequence with what is now Mark Wahlberg's theme song.
Yes.
And we get this glimpse of both of them where Mickey is this guy that like everybody believes in and the whole town knows, and Dickie is Dickie has a camera crew following him around, and he keeps saying it's for my comeback. HBO's doing a movie on my comeback, and of course, halfway through the movie, we learn it's actually a documentary about crack addiction. But for some reason, he just chooses to ignore that.
As bad as it is, Dickie Eklund reminds me of Scott Hall. That's the best way to explain it. His character reminds me, well, obviously it's a real person, but he reminds me of Scott Hall.
And then, of course, he's always, he's always trying to relive the glory days and doing the shadow boxing and all that. With Mickey or with his friend Boo Boo in the crack house.
Resurrecting the champ all over again.
But of course, he is addicted to drugs and can't get through that. The interesting thing I should point out that Rocky doesn't have a problem with, because there's no person like this. Even though Bale won for supporting actor and the movie is Mickey's story, a lot of people think that Bale is just as much of a leading character. Because we follow his drug addiction just as much as we follow Mickey's fighting.
Yeah.
You'll even notice on the poster and the DVD cover that Bale is actually more in the foreground than Wahlberg is.
Yeah.
And of course, sadly, Wahlberg was the only person in the main cast not nominated.
Yeah.
He got into the Globes.
Such a tight year though, so he was never going to get nominated.
Yeah, that was when Javier Bardem suddenly came out of nowhere.
Yes.
But and who predicted that?
You did.
But the thing is but yeah, it's split up equal. It doesn't go in one direction too much in the other. It actually, the main focus is Mickey's fighting, but Dickie's drug addiction is a big chunk of the plot.
Yeah.
Like, they are split up, but obviously in the middle of the movie, Dickie ends up going to prison, and that's when Mickey can really, completely bask in the spotlight of this story. But the main drama stems from the fact that they're trying to figure out who's going to, once Mickey starts getting bigger fights, like there was this particular fight he's been building up for. They keep calling his opponent the black Jewish guy. And he keeps building up this fight. But then finally, it gets to the night of the fight, and that guy has the flu, and his doctor won't let him fight. So Mickey ends up having to fight a guy that's like got 20 pounds on him. And apparently he just got off the couch, which I believe is like he hasn't been fighting, he hasn't been working out or anything. He just is going in after however long he's been out.
Mm-hmm.
But they keep building it up like this will be okay because he's actually been knocked out by a guy that Mickey's beat, so this should be no problem. And of course, Mickey gets his ass kicked.
Yep.
To where he's still bleeding like 3 days later out of his face.
Very true.
And that's when he goes on the date with He actually avoids Charlene's first date because he's embarrassed. And he's still covered in blood. So they go out and they go to this foreign movie. And she realizes what's going on and like, are you trying to, hide me or something? And he says he's just so embarrassed he can't show his face in Lowell because he got beat that badly. So Charlene basically takes a hold of this and tries to become basically his manager of sorts. Because she doesn't think his mom sets up the fights good enough, and obviously Dickie's never on time because he's always at the crack house. So, there's this guy O'Keefe, who is a co-op that basically helps Mickey train. This is actually the guy playing O'Keefe. There's no playing him. The guy O'Keefe was actually in their lives and he plays himself. Exactly what he did in real life.
Wow.
And there's Mickey's dad, who's kind of in the middle of this. And that's a funny character. Like when he tackles Dickie and then he ends up getting punched by him. And the particular scene where all the sisters, one of which is Conan O'Brien's sister, goes to Mickey's house where Charlene is, and they try to start a fight, and this massive fight breaks out, and his dad pulls up to the house and gets out to see what's going on, and as soon as he sees it's all the sisters and the mom and everybody fighting, he just gets in the truck and leaves. And that's where the main story I think comes into play, where it's this battle between O'Keefe and Charlene trying to manage this side of Mickey, but then you have Dickie and Alice who are trying, and they're basically fighting over him. And then obviously Marky Mark has this big moment where he talks about I'm the one that's fighting, it's why can't I just choose to say everybody? And then of course everybody has their selfish side where everybody on one side doesn't want the other people involved and the other way around, and it's just this big clusterfuckery of family drama. So that's what I remember that being a big deal when it came out. It's mostly a family drama more than like a boxing movie then.
Yeah.
But like also the whole Dickie story also is its own thing. We'll talk about the cast. Obviously, okay, we'll talk about Amy Adams first, actually, because a lot of people didn't like her Oscar nomination. What was interesting was she had movies like Miss Pettigrew and Enchanted and Junebug, where she's these meek, and Doubt, where she's these really meek, quiet characters that look like they just need a hug.
Yeah.
And then, but then in The Fighter, she plays like this, you know, badass Massachusetts can beat your ass girl. And she's pretty much kind of, and that was unheard of when The Fighter came out, her doing a part like that. But I think now with that and The Master, I think it's kind of something she's kind of grown into, I guess. So, or like when you see her in interviews, I guess she's actually seems more like that than she does the meek person. So maybe the meek part was unheard of, and this is normal.
You can tell in the American Hustle trailers too.
Yeah. So then there is Melissa Leo. I guess we can talk about. I do think she was worthy of her win.
Definitely.
And mainly, she has a few standout scenes, but the one that always comes to mind, it's a good scene for both of them, but I think it's an especially good scene for her when she has to, we've already done this once, they go to pick up Dickie at the crack house, and he jumps out the back window and tries to take off. But Alice shows up at the house and comes around and sees him just as he's jumping out the window. But when he sees that she sees him, he doesn't even try to run away. She just starts to cry and goes back to the car, and he just follows her. And they don't even say anything. And they're both in the car, and she's crying over what it is that he's become. And he just starts to sing, "I started a joke." And then they start singing together and drive off, and that's their reconciliation.
It's the only time this has been used in a movie previously is Penn and Teller Get Killed's credit song.
And of course we talked about Bale, who is just like out of this world in this. And he gets to go through all the stages. He gets to be the comedy relief. He gets to have drama scenes. He gets to be angry. He gets to go through detox. He gets to the scene where he's in prison gloating about the documentary and coming to the realization of what the documentary really is.
He's all so excited about it, and then it comes on, and he's like, "What is this?"
We see his son, who's the kid from Bad Grandpa. He's like, "I want to watch Dad on TV," and they're like, "No." And Mickey's ex-wife is actually making their daughter watch the documentary so she can see what Dickie is when he's trying to get her to. He called hoping they were making sure she wasn't watching it, but. As far as the fighting goes, the thing that I love that Russell did with the fights in The Fighter is they're all shot to look like they're on HBO.
Yeah.
Like we get, like obviously in sports movies you get more up close and personal than you would watching it on TV. And we still have these more up close and personal movie shots of the fights, but even in those it still looks like you're watching it on fucking HBO or something.
True.
So, I would say this might seem like sacrilege, but me personally, if I absolutely had to, I think I would choose The Fighter of these two.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's hard to say because, you know, Rocky is like
the gold standard.
Yeah. But where what gives The Fighter the edge is where I think Rocky would get a little melodramatic in a couple of scenes. The Fighter would do those same scenes only really effectively. I never got the family is always fighting and doing all that, but it's so real to the point that none of it feels like. It doesn't feel like soap opera melodrama. It feels like you're actually watching a family fight.
Mm.
So. I think that's what the core of the movie really is that family plot. So I think that's my decision here.
All right. So this is and this is how it's going to stay from now on, apparently. We're going to be doing verses this way. We're not going to be doing the categories anymore. We've abandoned that. This actually seems like it flows a lot better, too, to be honest.
I was afraid it would be too all over the place if I didn't split them up, but
It's working pretty well so far.
hopefully.
Next week is also going to be While I'm Gone. Actually, the first video While I'm Gone. And the cryptic comment. AJ, you want to give it one? Because I don't have one for this one.
I don't know.
It's so hard to come up with one for this one.
I don't have one.
Oh, I don't either.
I want to say maybe greed.
That's a good one.
Maybe greed will work.
We'll use greed.
Okay.
Your cryptic comment for next week's versus, well, I am going to be Home Sweet Home, is greed. And I'll throw it out to you right now. The week after, the cryptic comment is Spotlight. So, AJ, any parting words for Rocky versus the Fighter?
Sugar Ray slipped. Yeah.
Says Battling Bob Satterfield.